Hello, guys. Welcome once again. Yesterday we had a discussion on monetary policy, aggregate demand, and aggregate supply. We did something on aggregate demand shifts. We also did something on okay. So let me write it down. So yesterday we had a discussion on monetary policy, aggregate demand, aggregate supply. That we looked at short run aggregate supply. We looked at short run aggregate supply and also long run aggregate supply. Now this morning, we are going to look at situation whereby there is a shift in aggregate demand, aggregate supply. That is so we are looking at three things this morning. We are going to look at aggregate demand shock. It can be positive shock. It can also be negative shock. So some of the positive shocks of aggregate demand are when there's a shift in the autonomous consumption, government expenditure, and the rest, right? And we are also going to look at the situation whereby there is a permanent supply shock, which can also be negative and positive as well. And we did this thing yesterday, but what we are going to do today is we will look at a situation whereby there is an aggregate demand shock, and we look at a situation whereby the central bank decides to respond to that shock, a situation whereby the central bank does not decide to respond to that. So maybe let's say there's an aggregate demand shock. Let's say in the case where there is an aggregate demand shock, AD, the central bank can decide to say, okay, I'm not going to respond to this shock. So that is no response. If the central bank chooses not to respond to it, and the situation whereby the central bank decides to respond to it by maybe stabilizing inflation, or stabilizing inflation by stabilizing inflation or outputs, stabilizing inflation and output, let's say in the short run. Great. So we are going to do the same thing for situation whereby there is also a permanent supply shock. Now, when I say there's a permanent supply shock, then what it means is that there is a shift in the long run aggregate supply curve. And when I say, okay, there's a temporal supply shock, so I'm looking at the situation whereby there is a shift in short run aggregate supply curve. So basically, that's what we are going to look at today. We look at these things, look at when there's a shift and the central bank decides to respond to that shift. A situation whereby there's a shift and central bank does not respond to it. Okay, so I'm going to begin this analysis with that of aggregate demand shock. So let me clear my page again. Let me clear everything here. So let's look at a situation whereby there is an aggregate demand shock. Let's say aggregate demand shock. Example, let's say there's a crisis-induced consumption. There is a crisis-induced consumption, which implies there is a negative shock, right? Because consumption is going to go down. So let's say autonomous consumption is reduced, right? So let me start off by drawing my normal AD, aggregate demand. I'll call this at initial 0.0, and I'll call this one short run aggregate supply at 0.0, and this one becomes my long run aggregate supply at 0.0. So in the long run equilibrium, let's say we have Y potential indicating the long run equilibrium, right? And we have this one as the inflation at 0.0. So I'll call this at Y0. Now let's say we are saying that there is what a shift in aggregate demand, that is aggregate demand shock, but in this case it is negative shock, right? Because if there's a crisis-induced consumption slump, we expect our consumption to come down. So we are looking at a situation whereby the government does not respond to this. Now, once we have a negative shock, it is going to shift our AD curve. So our AD curve will shift leftward to AD1, and we are going to have a new equilibrium output here. That is Y1, and this is, and we have this as inflation in period 1. Great. Now this is the point that we are now after this shock. Now, so at the current point that we are, our Y1 is less than the YP, the potential in the long run. So that is, in the long run, we expect to be at point YP0, which is this point. It's supposed to be expected to be here, but because of this demand shock, it has been reduced to this point. Now, we always say the economic agents are also smart. So once we are producing out an output lower than an output that is lower than this point, the economic agent will anticipate that, oh, once economy is producing at a point that is lower than the potential outputs, then price is going to what? Increase in future. So they are going to have higher expectation for price. Now, if you recall, we write the AS curve formula as what? Expected inflation price lambda Y minus the Y potential plus the price shock, let's say price shock, right? So great. No, so once they know that, okay, the economy is producing at an output that is lower than the long run equilibrium, that is Y permanent here. So then the economy, they will also that, okay, wow, then in the future, we expect the economy to bounce back to this point. We expect the economy to bounce back at YP0, Y permanent at 0.0. Now, once they form that, then it means what? Then they will expect that in order for this one to increase up to this point, then they are going to form what? A lower expectation for price. Sorry, I said higher. It's supposed to be lower. So they are going to form a lower expectation for price, right? Now, once they form a lower expectation for price, what it means is that it's going to shape what? Our ADK, our AS curve, because this represents our AS curve, and it has been what? The expected price or inflation has gone down. So that means it is going to shift what? So it will shift until it gets back to this point. So we call this one the new equilibrium. Let me call this one short run aggregate supply curve. Short run aggregate supply curve 3, right? So that is, we are going to come back to this one, but at a lower price. That is price 3, right? So that means the economy will bounce back. Initially, we were here. We came back to this. So initially, we were producing at this point 0.1. There is what? Crisis-induced consumption, which has negative impact on our AD. And as a result, it causes our AD to shift from AD0 to AD1, which is, this is AD1, at a new equilibrium level of this point. That is output 1 and inflation here 1, or the price 1. Now, at this point, we have noticed that we are producing below the potential output or the long run output that we expect. That is, economy is below this. Now, once the economy is below this, we are seeing that economic agents are also intelligent. So once it happens like this, then they will have the expectation that, oh, then in order for this output to go back, to come back to the potential output, then it means they will have to reduce prices. So they will form a lower expectation of prices. And if you remember, if you recall our ES function, we wrote it as this one here. So once they have a lower expectation for prices, that means it's going to cause this one to come down. Now, once it comes down, what does it mean? It means our ES curve, which is a short-run aggregate supply curve, is going to shift. That is why it's also shift. It will shift until it gets back to this point, right? So until it gets back to the potential. So this is point 1, 2, 3. So we were here and we moved all the way to point 2. And at point 2, it has also moved all the way up to point 3. So this is what happens when there is aggregate demand shock and the government or the central bank decides not to do anything about it. Is it okay? Now let's look at the situation whereby there is an aggregate demand shock and the central bank decides also to respond to it in the short run. Let's say policy stabilizes output and inflation. Is okay. So let's look at it also from here. Now the same thing. Let's draw our demand curve. First of all, this is my long run aggregate supply at 0.0. This is my aggregate demand at 0.0. And this is my aggregate supply, short run aggregate supply. Right. I always use the long run and short run to distinguish between the two supply curves that we are talking about. So anytime that we are producing at a point whereby these 3 points are meeting, the long run gives supply, short run gives supply, and that of demand is meeting what we call the Y potential. So this is where we are expected to produce, right? So in the long run, this is where we are. And this is our inflation. Now we said there's going to be what? Negative impact. So negative aggregate demand shock. So that shifts this one up to this point. So we are here. AD1, right? And so we are producing at this current point. So we are here. So let's say we come to P1. So let's say price 0, inflation at 0.0 is the targeted inflation. So that means this is what the central bank, the level of inflation that we expect to have in the economy, right? So once there's a change here and it has reduced, Y2. So the first step in this case is that once there's a negative shock, the aggregate demand shifts leftwards, right? So when it shifts, so first step 1, AD shifts from AD shift from AD0 to AD1. That is the leftward, right? Okay. And then at that point we are producing at what, a level of Y2 and inflation period inflation 1, right? So look at something. So when you check, inflation has gone down. It's okay. So inflation has gone down. Now let's look at the situation whereby the central bank is targeting inflation at level 0. So that is the central bank does not want inflation to come down, right? So because of the negative shock, AD is coming to this point. It has now shifted. Great, it has shifted. Now because the central bank is targeting inflation, the central bank does not want inflation to decrease. Now in order for this to happen, what can the central bank do? And the central bank can only influence what? The monetary policy curve. So we said the monetary policy curve R is equals to what? R bar plus lambda, and this is inflation, right? Now, if the central bank does not want inflation to go down, then what can the central bank do? The central bank can do this. What can the central bank do? So here, the central bank does not want inflation to go down. So it means we want inflation to go up again. So what the central bank can do is what? To reduce the autonomous part of the interest policy curve, that is the autonomous R. Once the central bank reduces that, what happens? It means once R falls, our R is going to fall. Now, once our R is going to fall, what happens to our R investment, which is a function of this, will increase, right? So once investment increases, it is going to cause our Y to increase. Now, if you remember, we said if there is a change in the autonomous R, then that will lead to a shift in what? AD. So once the central bank decides to ease monetary policy, right, by reducing autonomous R, then it will cause the AD curve to shift backwards to its previous state, right? So it is going to cause it to be here, and we have moved to 0.2. Now it's going to cause it to shift backwards. So it will shift again until it gets back to its previous state, right? So once it shifts back to it, then it gets back to its previous state. So what it means is that so let me take it again. This is our initial point that we are producing, right? Now this is what the central government wants. There is a negative aggregate demand shock, and the aggregate demand shock has caused this one to shift to AD1, right? So we have attained a new equilibrium level of inflation period 1 and then output 2. But the central bank wants to stabilize inflation. So the target is we want it to be here. It's okay. And it is coming down here. So what does the central bank needs to do in order for inflation to get back to this previous state? That is the inflation target 0 here. Now we are saying that this can be achieved. So once the AD shift, it means our AD has caused our output to shift up to this point, right? Now what the central government can do is what? To ease monetary policy, easing monetary policy. That means, and we said the central bank can do that only through changing the autonomous part of the real monetary policy curve or the real interest rate. So if the central bank decides to reduce the real interest rate, what happens? It means it is going to shift our AD curve. That is what we agreed on in our previous discussion. So it will cause our AD curve to shift backwards again until it gets to its previous state, right? Until it gets back to its old previous state again. So the negative shock caused it to shift here. And because the central bank also is introducing autonomous easing of monetary policy, it is now causing it to shift back again. Now it will shift back until it gets to this point again, where it is now producing at what? The economy is now at inflation period level, inflation 0, and that of this is okay. So this is what happens when the central government, the central bank decides to respond to it by what? By targeting inflation in the short run. So by targeting inflation and then output in the short run, because by reducing real interest rate, right, we are able to also go back to the level of inflation that we want, and we have also been able to achieve those the potential level that we want. So what we are saying here is that there is a negative aggregate demand shock. Now the negative aggregate demand shock led to a shift in our AD curve up to AD1, and that led to a new equilibrium level of inflation period 1 and that of output 2. Now what we are saying is that the central bank is also trying to stabilize output and inflation. That is, we are targeting this and this back, right? So we want to get back to that old previous state that we had, and we can only do this through what? The only tool that the central bank can use is the monetary policy curve, and that is a component of autonomous R and inflation, autonomous R multiplied by the lambda inflation. So what we are saying is that the central bank can only achieve this through easing monetary policy. That is, the central bank reduce the autonomous part of the real interest rate. Once we do that, it means the real interest rate will go down, and that will lead to an increase in investment. Now, once our increase in investment, that means our output will increase. So it will increase until it gets back to this level. And in the same way, once our Y, which is like income, is increasing, that means we have more purchasing power, you can buy more. And that will also lead to inflation going up. And the inflation will also go up until it gets to the target 0. I hope this is okay. Great. So let's look at the situation whereby there is a permanent supply shock and the central bank does not respond, and where there is a permanent supply shock and the central bank responds. So let me clear this part. Okay, so we are looking at permanent supply shock. So I'll start with drawing my curves. So this is my long ground. my long run aggregate supply curve at point 0. This is my aggregate AD at period 0. And this is my short run aggregate supply curve at period 0. So this is the level that we are producing. Oh, sorry. So this is the level that we are producing. Y0, potential, and inflation level at that point of 0. Is okay? Now let me change this. Now let's say let's say there is what? A negative permanent supply shock. So when there's a negative permanent supply shock, what is going to happen? The first thing is that it will cause what? The long run aggregate curve to shift leftward. So the long ground aggregate supply curve will shift what? Leftward. Is it okay? It will shift leftward at new level here. And then I have Y also 1 here, right? So now the economy is now producing at what? So we are here again. Now economy is now producing at a level below the long run equilibrium, right? So once we have this situation, then economic agent will also anticipate that, okay, if that is the situation, then why we expect price towards in order for, sorry, 1 minute. Okay, so sorry. So what it means is that we are coming now. This is the potential here. So that means look at something. In this case, it was the long run curve that was shifted. Is okay. Now, when the long run curve is shifted, so this is the new long run equilibrium that the economy wants to attain. That is the red one, right? That is the red one. So in this situation, then once the economy also wants to go to Apple level Y1, then the economic agents will also anticipate that, okay, then in future this can only happen when there's what? A higher prices. So they will also anticipate a higher inflation. And once we have our short run ES, which is equals to expected inflation plus lambda y minus y potential plus the price shock. So once the economic agent forms a higher inflation, that is, it will then cause inflation to increase. That's what it means. But because this, if you remember, we said anytime there is a change in any of these ones, it leads to a shift in the short run aggregate supply. So now that the economic agents are thinking that this one is going up, that means they have formed a higher expected inflation, then it will cause the short run aggregate supply curve to shift backwards until it gets to this point, right? That is, we are going to have this curve as short run aggregate supply. Let me call this one 1. Is okay. So we are going to have it like this. So that means in the short run, that is, if the government fails to respond, then the economy is going to fall from this up to this point. Is okay. And then the inflation prices has also increased from this point up to this point. I hope this is okay. So the first step is this. Now we have what? A negative supply shock, a negative long run supply shock. And that is causing our long run aggregate supply curve to shift to this new level, right? Now the second step is what? Once it shifts there, it means we are having what? A new level of what? This one and this one. Now, and we are saying that once economic agents are always intelligent. So once they notice that, okay, now in the long run, the economy is going to fall from output 0 to output 1, then they will know that, okay, this is only possible when we have what? Higher inflation or higher prices. So they will form what? Higher expectation of prices. And once they form higher expectation of prices, it causes our aggregate supply curve to shift. So the aggregate supply curve will shift from this level 1 until it gets to this point. So I can call this point at point 2, right? So until it gets to this point. So that is this is going to be our new equilibrium levels. And this is the situation whereby the central government does not respond to it. Is okay? Okay, so now let's look at the situation whereby there is a permanent supply shock and the central bank decides to stabilize policy that will stabilize inflation. You're looking at the policy that will stabilize inflation. So let me clear this part again. So we are looking at the policy that will stabilize inflation. So we have our aggregate demand. We have our short-run aggregate supply. And we have our long run aggregate. We have our long run aggregate supply at 0.0. So we are producing at this level, Y potential 0, and we are producing at this inflation point. It's okay. This is inflation point 0, which is our target. It's okay. Now let's say, as we said, there is a negative permanent shock, right? So that will cause the long run aggregate supply curve to shift up to this point. Is okay. So it is going to shift up to this point. So we are producing at this level. Now we are producing at this Y potential level 3. It's okay. Now once economic agents also know that, okay, this is the level that the central bank is producing, right? So this output here in this case, and now they know that this is where we want to get back. We want to go to in the long run, right? And the inflation is supposed to be high, right? Ideal inflation is supposed to be here. It's okay. Now, once the central bank also estimate that, okay, this is the situation, what they can do is what? To use what? Autonomous monetary tightening policy. Is okay. So once you do that, you want to output to 4 because we want to get back to this level. We want to get back to this level, right? So once the central bank introduce autonomous monetary policy, that is tightening monetary policy, it will cause our AD to shift, but that can be achieved through what? Increasing what? Our R, tightening monetary policy. So we are going to increase our R. That will imply that our real interest rate will goes up, our investment is going to fall. Our investment is going to fall, and our Y is going to what? Fall. That means our AD is going to shift downwards, right? So our AD will shift from here. Our AD is going to shift from AD up to AD1, right? Our AD is going to shift. Great. I hope it's okay.